It's the Palmetto Conservative Show with your host, Jim Lee, bringing you all things conservative in the great state of South Carolina, from the upstate to the low country, from the coast to Columbia. If it's on your mind, it's on our show. So tune in, take notes, and let's make a stand. And now, it's the Palmetto Conservative Show. Let's jam.
Welcome back into hour number 2 of the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the Conservative Broadcast Media Network. I'm your host, Jim Lee, part political junkie, part technology geek, part commentator, and sometimes snarky agitator for the application of common sense and the pursuit of critical thinking in the marketplace of ideas, particularly as it relates to the Palmetto State. I don't profess to have all the answers, folks, just an awful lot of relevant questions. Hopefully you're tuning back in after the first hour. I apologize for the inconveniences that were presented as we continue to iron out the technical details here with our new technology. But that said, hopefully you're enjoying the presentation this evening. And what can be nothing short of a rant on the Palmetto Conservative Show. This evening we kicked off with a brief overview of what's going on here in the Palmetto State with regard to the November elections, and segued from there into a critique of the first 2 presidential debates. And basically, as I like to put it, rhetoric versus reality. Or, in the more snarky sense, Barack Hussein Obama, bluster, bravado, and bovine fecal matter. And that's what we spent the better part of hour 1 discussing. And the fact that never before in our country's history, I think, have we been in such desperate need for capable leadership and management skills. And of the 2 prevalent choices that we have, there certainly are other choices. I don't think that they're particularly realistic at this point. Not that someday a third-party candidate might not make a viable run, but this time around, I'm afraid that really the options are the choice of the 2 predominant political parties. And that's a topic for another show for an entire evening, I'm sure. Found it interesting that, speaking of third parties, H. Ross Perot has come out and endorsed. He's endorsed Mitt Romney. Says we can't afford Barack Obama. From an opinion article that he posted yesterday. He says our country faces a momentous choice. The fact is the United States is on an unsustainable course. At stake is nothing less than our position in the world, our standard of living at home, and our constitutional freedoms. That is why I am endorsing Mitt Romney for president. We can't afford 4 more years in which debt mushrooms out of control, our government grows, and our military is weakened. For the past 4 years, we have squandered one opportunity after the next to turn things around. The longer we delay acting, the steeper the price we will have to pay. Let's look at the country as it is now. The American economy is stagnant. Economic growth is insufficient to create enough jobs for a country whose population is growing. The result is unemployment stuck over 8% for every single month of Barack Obama's presidency. We have 23 million Americans who are looking for work and either can't find a full-time job, can't find a job at all, or who have given up looking. That is wrong. It's not the way America ought to be. At the same time, and not unrelated, is the extraordinary explosion of federal deficits and federal debt. In the last 4 years during Obama's presidency, he's added around $5 trillion to our national debt, more than any previous president. This was accomplished by successive federal budgets that each ran deficits exceeding $1 trillion a year. It is this massive deficit spending that threatens to undermine our future standard of living. To pay for our government's massive debts, Washington's profligacy, our children and grandchildren will be paying interest and principal on the nation's debt for untold years into the future. That is wrong. It's not the way America ought to be. Even as we have engaged in runaway domestic spending, the country has been put on the path to massive cuts in the defense budget. President Obama's own Secretary of Defense has called the proposed cuts, quote unquote, devastating to our nation's security. History teaches that the price of military weakness always exceeds the price of preparedness. And yet at the moment when turbulence is sweeping critical regions of the world, we are increasingly unprepared. That is wrong. It's not the way America ought to be. It is for these reasons that I am endorsing Mitt Romney. He has spent most of his career in the private sector. He understands how jobs are created. He understands how government can get in the way of that process. As a president, he would do what this administration has been unable to do, which is reform our federal government, pare it back, and, most critically, keep it from acting as a brake on economic growth. Equally important, as a governor, Mitt Romney balanced the budget of his state for 4 straight years without raising taxes. Writing in all caps is called shouting, and that fact is something that deserves to be shouted from the rooftops. I should add that Governor Romney accomplished this feat while working with a legislature that was overwhelmingly under the control of the Democratic Party in one of the most liberal states in the country. In short, although he is a rock-solid conservative, he knows how to reach across the aisle and make common cause with those with whom he disagrees. These are leadership qualities that are sorely needed in Washington today. President Obama promised a great deal. He has had his chance. The results are visible for all to see. It's time for a new beginning. It is time for Mitt Romney. And that is H. Ross Perot, who ran the most successful third-party candidacy for president in the history of this country. Notwithstanding one of our previous presidents who did run as an independent, but short of that, I believe that Teddy Roosevelt actually ran as an independent, but I could be wrong. My American history is coming back to bite me here. But nevertheless, Ross Perot, we can't afford Barack Obama. And really, it's not any more complicated than that. If you believe that what we've seen over and over in the last 4 years is truly success, if you believe that the path which we are on is pointing in the right direction, and I don't mean left versus right, but in the correct direction, then you're open for another 4 more years of this nonsense. But if, like me and so many others, you find yourself not better off than you were 4 years ago, then it would be senseless to give President Obama another 4 years at the helm. Now, I talked about the first 2 presidential debates and what struck me there, and how it really came down to a matter of competence and capable leadership and management skills becoming readily apparent, and the disconnect between rhetoric and reality. When you look at the vice presidential debate last week, well, to borrow a humorous anecdote that was brought out by Dennis Miller today, he was out stumping for Mitt Romney and came up to the podium and told a joke that went as follows. He said, somebody backstage had given me some coffee. I went to taste it and nearly spewed it out of my mouth. Turned to the young lady who gave it to him and said, what's with this coffee? It's old and bitter. And the woman responded, that's just Joe being Joe. The vice presidential debate was, to me, one of the most embarrassing spectacles of American politics that I've ever seen. Um, on one hand, you had a candidate, admittedly much younger than the other, who was trying to have a substantive debate, a dialogue about the direction of this country. Now, whether you agree with him at all, whether you agree with Representative Ryan on any of his positions, you cannot view that debate and come away with the perception that Representative Ryan was simply there to play games, was there to act, was there to entertain. He really wanted to present some specific ideas and to have a debate. And yet, on the other hand, you had a candidate who, for all of his years in the United States Senate, I struggled to find any notable achievements, any demonstration of any real leadership. Joe Biden was never Senate Majority Leader. Joe Biden, like his running mate, Barack Obama, has never run so much as a lemonade stand. He's a product of Washington and has spent his entire life making a career out of politics. And he carried on as such an arrogant, blustering, pompous ass that I can find no other words to describe him. And he even went further than the broad berth that most people give Vice President Biden in just calling him crazy Uncle Joe and everything. He went beyond that and made a caricature of himself. On no measure at all can you honestly say that he was there to truly debate the issues, even if you were to accept the supposed superior intellect of Vice President Biden. You would think he would have destroyed Representative Ryan with his arguments, with his power of persuasion, of his superior knowledge of the inner workings of government. But no, on the other hand, he demonstrated and bloviated and could not make a case for anything that he stood for. He couldn't make the case for his boss. He trotted out the same tired liberal cliches and talking points that the president did in the previous debate, poorly, and that he did last night, a little more aggressively, but equally as poor. It was amazing. And I came away from that embarrassed, truly embarrassed. Not only for the Obama-Biden ticket, not only for the Democrat Party, but I was embarrassed for those who previously supported that ticket in 2008 because they fell for the hope and change. They fell for the rhetoric. So now they're painted into a corner.